Stop talking trades. Start talking title push. The Rams re-enter themselves in the playoff conversation with a huge statement win on Thursday Night Football against one of the best teams in the NFC in the Minnesota Vikings. We'll talk about all the stars being back, and we'll talk about another season-saving win on tonight's edition of the Locked On Rams Postcast. When? Right now.
You are Locked On Rams Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Los Angeles, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Whose house? Rams house. What's going on, Ramley? And welcome back to the latest edition of the Locked On Rams Postcast, coming at you live here on this Thursday night edition, right here on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel, and after the fact, wherever you get the Locked On Rams podcast feed. If you don't know who I am, my name is Gavin Carlson, former credentialed journalist in the LA area with the Daily Bruin, covering UCLA football, UCLA basketball, and all that good stuff. Now part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Our team is the Rams, and our Rams are tired of the trade talk. They're tired of Cooper Kupp to the Chiefs and yada, yada, yada. Quit yapping, start watching. The Rams are back. The Stars back today. Cooper Kupp and, surprisingly, Puka Nacua back on the field for our Rams. And they waste no time telling the NFC and the NFL world that this is not the Rams that lost a couple in a row with no offensive weapons earlier in the season. This is an elite team, an elite offense, and a good enough defense to make a playoff push and make some noise in the NFC. A 30-20 win over the Minnesota Vikings, who came into this game 5-1, fired up after a tough, tight loss against the class of the NFC and the Detroit Lions. Of course, the Vikings were favored coming into this one, even with Cooper Kupp coming back, even with the surprise addition of Puka Nacua coming back. And yet, despite there being quite a few Vikings fans in SoFi Stadium, despite, Cooper Kupp getting, looking rusty at times, Puka Nacua coming up looking a little injured at times, to be honest, despite, we won't talk too much about that missed face mask call at the end of the game. We're going to talk about the Rams silencing all the trade talk and re-entering themselves into the playoff picture. But before we do, first and foremost, shout out to everybody in here. I see BC, I see Craig, I see Jeffrey Williams, all letting me know what they think. Please join them in letting me know what you think here in the comment section. Shout out to everybody who's watching this live and after the fact. And also a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's show. It is Prize Picks, and specifically this Thursday Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5 on Prize Picks. Where we start this one tonight, on this Thursday Night Football is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the saying, Jimmies and Joes, not X's and O's. I don't know if you have. I'll be honest, the first time I heard it was actually on a video game, NCAA Football 25 this year. I think it was Kirk Herbstreit saying it. Ironic, we get him tonight on this Amazon Prime Thursday Night Football game. If you don't know what the heck Jimmies and Joes over X's and O's means, it means talent beats scheme, okay? And tonight, in my opinion, was evidence of that, because you have two head coaches in Sean McVay and O'Connell for the Vikings that obviously are so similar, for obvious reasons. The Vikings coach coming from the Rams staff, the same McVay offensive scheme, run heavy, a lot of motion, coming out in 12 personnel, multiple tight ends on the field. Every play looks like it can be a pass, starts off by looking like it can be a run, looks like it can be a jet sweep, looks like it can be a quick screen, looks like it can be a play action on every single play, right? Two very similar schemes because they're basically identical. They came from the same coaching tree. And so what we saw early in this game was two offensive schemes having success. I mean, the Vikings come out in their first two drives looking unstoppable. They open the game with an 8-play, 70-yard drive. Rams defense really showing no resistance. Then the Rams do the same thing. How about 9 plays, 70 yards? They're both basically exactly 4 minutes. They're both basically the same amount of plays, 8 and 9 plays. And then the Vikings come back. They go 10 plays, this time a much longer drive, almost 6 minutes, but still 10 plays, 70 yards, another touchdown. So early on, both teams trading, and then what do the Rams do? The same. I mean, it's creepy how identical this is. 2 70-yard drives of around 4 minutes, and then 2 70-yard drives of around 6 minutes. Back and forth, 14-14 in the first quarter, and it's looking like, wait a second, this game is going to be, that Rams-Chiefs game on a Monday Night Football where first team to 50 wins. Now, ironically, then both offenses stall out. We have 4 consecutive punts after 4 consecutive touchdowns, and we see a 14-14 start to the game become 14-14 at half. Now, where am I getting this Jimmies and Joes over X's and O's? Well, the scheme, you see the strength of the scheme early on, at least in my opinion. There was a stat talking about Sam Darnold being the most efficient quarterback in the first quarter in the entire NFL. Is Sam Darnold the best quarterback in the NFL? Heck no. Is he even close? Heck no. I mean, there were rumors this week of Stafford to the Vikings, Darnold to the Rams. Why? Because the Vikings, I mean, as BS as that rumor probably was, everybody knows that this Vikings team is elite, but is it Super Bowl worthy with Sam Darnold? I don't know. And while Darnold played a good game, he did play a good game, it wasn't the elite game we saw from Matthew Stafford. Now, let me get back to this Jimmies and Joes over X's and O's. The schemes were the same in the ways that these, not only were the drives almost identical in terms of yardage and time possession, but the same types of things. Play action, throws over the middle, make the linebackers step up, hit, the second level, 15-yard in routes to Justin Jefferson endlessly on those first couple of drives. I mean, every play. It was either run the ball to Aaron Jones. Luckily, we were able to slow him down as the game went on, but it was Aaron Jones runs, have the linebackers creep up, play action, hit Justin Jefferson across the middle, and then he had a couple unbelievable sideline catches. Well, what do the Rams do? Very similar stuff. They hit guys across the middle. Puka Nacua in the first quarter, absolutely cooking. Those 10, 15-yard intermediate routes, absolutely on fire. Same thing. As the game went on, those became less open on both sides. Justin Jefferson's making one-handed catches down the sideline, but then how about Demarcus Robinson making contested catches down the sideline in the end zone, right? Same game from both teams in terms of the scheme carries you in the first quarter. That's why Sam Darnold might be the best, statistically wise, the best quarterback in the first quarter so far this season, because their scheme, their talent, it combines to make you an elite offense in the first quarter. But as the game goes on, as the defense is able to adjust, right? Offense dictates the game early, the defense adjusts, and then how does your offense respond when you're not just scripting every play? The Rams have more talent offensively in the most important positions than the Vikings, and the Jimmies and Joes, aka the players, the talent on the field, outdid the X's and O's, which, let's be honest, as much of a genius as McVay is, the Vikings might have the second best offensive genius in football right now. Ben Johnson with the Lions is certainly up there. That's why they're one of the best teams in the league, despite not many people thinking Jared Goff is one of the 3, 4, 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? The moral of the story is X's and O's, both teams were identical for most of this game. That's why it was 14-14 early. 2 offensive masterminds helping their 2 offenses cook, absolutely cook. But then once the second half hits, once there's 4 straight punts to go into halftime, once the second half starts, ironically, it starts with a Matthew Stafford's interception on what was just quite frankly not a good throw at all. Just completely overthrows a corner route on a flood concept. You have the receiver go in the flat, the corner on the outside goes for the flat, then the second intermediate route on the sideline, and Demarcus Robinson is open, and Stafford just completely airmails it. I was shocked. I was like, we don't see this from Stafford very often. If there's typically turnovers from him, it's him trying to do too much, especially this season, him trying to do too much because there's not much protection around him, and throughout most of the season, not much talent in the receiving core around him. But tonight there was the talent. He didn't have to force things too much, which is why you see a couple of throws there, as I'm messing with my headphones, you see a couple throws there, not many, where he has to make those crazy, running, evading. I mean, that second touchdown, I don't know how I haven't talked about it yet. That second touchdown where he spins out of a sack, then ducks under a sack, fires one to Cooper Kupp, yelling as he runs to the sideline. That was vintage elite Matthew Stafford. That reminded the whole I say country. That reminded the whole NFL, we still have one of the best quarterbacks in the game, and the Vikings do not, right? So even though Stafford throws that interception to start the second half, and it had us a little bit nervous. What was that? And even though the Vikings march down the field and do get a field goal, they only get a field goal despite being at the 5. In the second and third segments, we'll get to the defense being bend but not break multiple times in this game and clutching up as the game progressed. But after that Vikings touchdown, or field goal, to go up 17-14, we saw Jimmies and Joes overcome X's and O's, and Matthew Stafford made a couple incredible throws, evading guys. We did get some help on penalties. We didn't help ourselves with a couple penalties ourselves, but Demarcus Robinson being your third best receiver is pretty darn nice, right? And him being the number 1 receiver with those 2 guys out, suddenly he's the number 3 receiver. That's Jimmies and Joes. That's talent. That's not X's and O's. That throw down the sideline, was he wide open? No. Was that him schemed beautifully by Sean McVay? No. That was Stafford saying, I got one-on-one coverage with Demarcus Robinson. He might be my number 3, but he's a really talented number 3. Threw it up to him. He made an unbelievable play. He was getting guarded by Griffin, not Stephon Gilmore, not an elite corner. We get a touchdown. Vikings march down, but they don't do enough. They only get another field goal. Once again, the scheme, the X's and O's, slowing down in terms of its success once the defense has time to adjust. Meanwhile, what happens when the Rams get the ball back again, this time up 21-20? The Jimmies and Joes come through again. Stafford doing his thing. He hits Corum for 9. He hits Long for 18. Corum has a couple short runs. Kyren Williams for 7. Kyren Williams, he had an unbelievable game. Continues to do what he does. You don't even need to say what he did because you know what he did. He probably carried the ball 20-plus times. He probably had 100-plus yards, and he probably had at least 1 touchdown. Yep, you bet. You guessed it. He did it again. And then how about Cooper Kupp drawing a pass interference? Kyren Williams, again, a couple runs. And then finally, Stafford finds Demarcus Robinson. There's too many talented receivers on the field. And where you see talent and Jimmies and Joes be more important than X's and O's is in the red zone. Sure, there are a couple touchdowns that were because of X's and O's and scripting guys open. Absolutely. That Vikings touchdown where they're at the 5 and they have the backup tight end block, and then release, catch the ball wide open in the end zone. That's all scheme. That's not talent. We know that. That's the backup tight end for the Vikings. But when it's when it's 3rd and 4 at the Minnesota 10 and there's Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua on the left side, all the defensive attention goes to the left. Demarcus Robinson wide open on the right. That's the combination of some pretty darn good X's and O's with Sean McVay, but also some pretty darn good Jimmies and Joes and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua taking the attention away. Demarcus Robinson becomes your number 3 wide receiver, and he catches 2 touchdowns in a row as a result to put this one basically away. Of course, we had the, back-to-back punts. Rams couldn't put their thing away. Cooper Kupp steps out of bounds, saves the Vikings some time. And then the controversial safety, we know that that's what they're going to talk about on Friday morning shows, First Take, whatever they call it on Fox Sports, all that. They'll be talking about the face mask that wasn't called. Was it a face mask? Yes. Would it have made that last drive really interesting? But do I think the Vikings were going to go down, score a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion? I do not. And it's because the defense, as this game went on, showed that they were good enough to stop this scheme-heavy Vikings offense. So when we come back, we'll talk about the defense a little bit more. We'll talk about some of the key players in this game. We talked a little bit about it in terms of Demarcus Robinson, but Kyren Williams deserves some more praise. Cooper and Puka Nacua will talk about their return to this Rams offense, as well as getting into the nitty-gritty with Matthew Stafford having an unreal performance, some defensive stars, and then we will talk about the future, the rest of this season, because the Rams are very much back in the playoff picture. We'll talk about it after our first break here on the Locked On Rams Postcast. Now, real quick here, I'm seeing the Wi-Fi might be an issue. I know it's awkward for me to say that right now, but I don't want there to be any sort of glitches or anything in the broadcast. So I'm just going to quickly make sure that the Wi-Fi is good to go. Should be fine. Let me know in the comments if it slows down at all. But with all that being said, we'll get to the first sponsor of today's show, and it is Pre-Alcohol by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink Zbiotics. I can't even talk. Excuse me. Let me try this again. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Now, I have used this product, despite me not being able to say it, and I will be honest. Every time I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, and I'll say, I don't go crazy, but for me, what I noticed is if I haven't eaten a lot of food during the day, if I am dehydrated, even though that's not the main culprit, but if I'm dehydrated, if I haven't had a lot of food, or if I'm having multiple drinks, I can confidently plan on, this pre-alcohol to make the next morning not an issue, right? Whether it's doing something on a Friday night and then me having to do a postcast on a Saturday morning for UCLA. That's been a common thing with UCLA playing these morning games now that they're on the East Coast in the Big Ten. Or if it's a Saturday night and then having to do a Rams postcast on a Sunday. I gave pre-alcohol a try multiple times to see how it would affect things. It made it a lot easier so that when I come on these shows Saturday and Sunday after a night out, I have nothing to worry about. Step 1 is just drink the pre-alcohol for best results. Make it your first drink of the night. Step 2 is drink responsibly, of course. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And then step 3 is enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. So go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Back here live on the Locked On Rams Postcast here on the Locked On Los Angeles YouTube channel and after the fact on the Locked On Rams podcast feed. I'm Gavin Carlson. I'm sweating as always. People always wonder and ask sometimes why I sweat so much. I turn all the AC, all the fans off in my place because I don't want any noise, affecting the quality of the audio. But let's just say it affects the quality of the room in terms of it is hot as heck in here. But I'm also hot because I'm fired up because the Rams are back, folks. They're not just back to, beating the Raiders by 5 and, another win in the win column. You heard how negative I was if you watched or listened to last week's postcast. I was not impressed by that win last week against the Raiders, but boy, am I impressed by tonight's win. You beat one of the best teams in the NFC, one of the best teams in the NFL so far this season. Pretty convincingly. I mean, I know it comes down to the last drive or whatever, but you win by 10. It felt like the first half was back and forth. It felt like the second half, the Rams were the better football team. So you pick up a huge win. You're right back in the playoff picture, right back in it in the NFC West. We know how bad the Niners have been at times this year and all the injuries. I mean, the Niners might not have anybody left on that offense. No McCaffrey, no Ayuk. Debo's questionable. Jawan Johnson's questionable. The offensive line's an issue. Brock Purdy might not be elite after all. The defense has a bunch of injuries. Seahawks are a wild card every week. Same thing with the Cardinals. This division's wide open. The NFC wild card picture is wide open. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now I want to get into some of the key individual performers. I talked a lot about talent being the difference in this one, not the X's and O's. Jimmies and Joes, not X's and O's. It's funny how I've never heard of it until this year, and now I'm saying it about 13 times on this show. But let's talk about some of those Jimmies and Joes a little bit more in terms of the individual performances. And as much as I want to start with Stafford because he might be the player of the game, you have to talk about the return of Puka and Cooper. Puka Nacua goes 7 catches for 106 yards. He has 9 targets, especially early in this game. The same way the Vikings were going at Justin Jefferson, not going at him, going to him early and often. I mean, Justin Jefferson had like 6 catches for 70 yards in the first quarter or something. He finishes with 8 catches on 9 targets for 115 yards. But the main difference is they really had no one else other than him. No one else on the Vikings roster has more than 2 catches other than Justin Jefferson, who has 8 of the team's 18. Meanwhile, Puka has 7. But Cooper Kupp, in his return, has 5 for 51, including the nice touchdown catch on an unbelievable play by Matthew Stafford we already brought up. But other than that, Kyren Williams, he has 5 catches, including a touchdown catch. Sure, Demarcus Robinson only has 2 catches, but it's 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, and 35 huge yards. Hunter Long with a catch for 18, Tutu Atwell with a catch for 18, Colby Parkinson with 2 for 17 as well. So Stafford able to spread the ball around, and it cannot be understated how huge it is to have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back, not just because they combined for 157 yards and 12 catches and a touchdown in their first games back, but because their presence on the field is the reason Demarcus Robinson gets one-on-one down the sideline and makes that contested 25-yard catch. Their presence, both of them being on the left side of the formation, is the reason that Demarcus Robinson is wide open on the right side of the field for his second touchdown catch of 10 yards. So, shout out to the Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for finding a way to get back on the field, both of them at the same time. And it really felt like this was the Rams Super Bowl. You rush the 2 wide receivers back. Puka Nacua, I think he looked like 90% back. There was a couple times where he got hit, he came back up, and he looked a little bit shaky, right? But you rush them both back, knowing that there's all this trade talk, knowing that we're hearing ridiculous things about Stafford getting traded to the Vikings, Cooper Kupp getting traded to the Chiefs, all this stuff. Instead, you rush the guys back, they help you get a win, and now you're 3-1 at home. You're right back in all the playoff pictures, and this Rams offense looks like the Rams offense we expected it to be with these talents. How about Kyren Williams, man? 23 for 97. A 17-yard rush. He did, like I say, also added the 5 catches for 19 yards, including a beautiful kind of Texas route, completely fools the linebacker on that touchdown catch on 3rd and goal, which was a huge play. He's fantastic, man. And maybe the stats here, you see 23 for 97, and it's just a little bit over 4 yards a carry, not way over it, but I think he was at 20 for 96 at some point in this game, which is, basically 5 yards a carry. He was great. And there were a couple runs. There was a 4th down run where, honestly, it looked like a couple guys on the field didn't, move at the first snap or at the snap. It looked like a disjointed play. He was able to wiggle enough to gain 3 yards on 4th and 1. He had a couple tough runs, always patient when you need him to be, always, downhill and very vertical, not horizontal with his running when you need him to be. Just reliable, no fumbles or anything, just reliable, especially today, helping this offense. Blake Corum, 4 carries, whatever. He's just kind of in to spell Kyren Williams at this point. And then we get to Matthew Stafford, who he had that 1 interception, which quite frankly was a really bad throw, just a complete missed throw. But other than that, this might have been Stafford's best game. And he looked darn elite in that primetime Sunday night game against the Lions. And he looks darn elite right here in this Thursday Night Football primetime game. We know he likes the primetime. We know how elite he thinks he is because he is. And I thought Darnold played a fine game, but once again, he played an 18 for 25, 240 yards and 2 touchdowns game. That's a decent game with a great coach. But how about a great coach plus Matthew Stafford? Well, you get 25 for 34, 279, and 4 of them touchdowns. Not 2, 4 of them. 4 of them. And the craziest stat of all, and probably the reason that the Rams win this game, despite going up against the Vikings defense and Brian Flores, one of the better defensive coaches in the entire NFL, head coach or defensive coordinator, I don't care. I think he's the next, it's very common and rightfully so for these teams to go with the young offensive coordinator as the head coach of the future. It's worked out with the McVays of the Vikings. It'll be Ben Johnson for the Lions, eventually having that same trajectory whenever he decides to actually become a head coach. We've seen Zach Taylor with the Bengals have some success, obviously made it to a Super Bowl. Defensively, it's been a little bit different, right? You see guys like, I guess Dan Quinn's had success for the Commanders, but it's not because of the defense. Obviously, Brian Flores has had limited success as a head coach. We just saw Robert Saleh get fired. So when these young D coordinators go, Brandon Staley's off the Rams coaching staff, not good at all with the Chargers, right? When the young defensive staff goes and becomes a head coach, usually doesn't work out as well. But I think Brian Flores will be a head coach in the NFL again at some point in the near future. And he's been phenomenal coaching this Vikings defense, which it's talented, but it's not crazy talented, and they've been crazy good. But tonight, not only do the Rams put up a 30-piece on this Vikings defense, but they also don't let Stafford get sacked once. Are you kidding me? With how bad this offensive line is, with a 6th-round pick as your starting center, with a rookie left tackle no sacks against this Vikings D-line. I mean, masterclass by McVay to help with that. Masterclass by Stafford to evade a couple sacks, including on that touchdown pass. And hats off to the offensive line. It deserves credit. It really, really does. So that is honestly the craziest stat of the game, is that you're able to not have Stafford get sacked once against this Vikings defense. When we come back, we will finally talk about the Rams defense a little bit, and then we'll look forward to the remainder of the season, because the Rams are right back in the playoff push. We'll talk about it after our last break here on this Thursday Night Football and Victory edition of the Locked On Rams Postcast. Pardon the sniffles. Now, finally, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Rams fans, NFL fans in general, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with how many? $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right. I have direct evidence, direct experience, direct proof. I talk about it a million times. I'll talk about it a million more times, especially now that I know that the Liberty are WNBA champs. That's pretty cool. I went to a Liberty game when I was in New York, bet $5 on them. They won the game. I got the $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Bet that on the Yankees. They're now in the World Series. So I guess if I go see you in New York, you win the title, or at least make it to the title in your sport. So, yeah, pretty cool. Shout out to the Liberty. And I know a lot of you people on here aren't going to like this, but I'm rooting for the Yankees. I'm sorry. I'm an Angels fan. I'm a Giants fan, originally Bay Area native. So I'm rooting against the Dodgers, and I know a lot of you are going to hate me for that, but I'm just saying it. Long story short, and what you don't care, or what you do care about more than me rooting against your team probably, is that you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here live one more time on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel. This is the Locked On Rams Postcast. I'm Gavin Carlson, and the Rams are back. Guess who's back? Back again. The Rams. Cooper Kupp, Puka, Nacua. They are back on the field, and the Rams are back in the win column. 2 wins in 5 days. How about going from 1-4 to 3-4 in 5 days? You get 2 superstar receivers back in a matter of seconds, and you're right back in the playoff picture. And how great does it feel? We're not trading Matthew Stafford to the Vikings or whatever they were saying. We're not trading Cooper Kupp to the Chiefs or whatever they're saying. They're staying. We're all staying, and we're right back in the playoff push, 30-20 over the then 5-1 Minnesota Vikings. Another thing we'll talk about here, I'm just going to say it now. I was going to talk about it later. Not only are the Rams, sure, they're 3-4. But they have played all 4 teams in this NFC North that has taken the NFL by storm to start the season. The best, win differential, the best winning percentage for division through the first 6 or 7 weeks or whatever in NFL history. The Lions, probably the best team in the NFC, one of the 3 best teams I'd say in the NFL. I'm taking Chiefs, Ravens, and then probably Lions, right? You lose to them in heartbreaking fashion in overtime, despite guys going down, Puka Nacua going down, the offensive line being as banged up as it gets, right? Then, the Cardinals blowout loss looks awful. There's no other way to put it. You beat the Niners, who at that time were healthy-ish. You beat them. And then back-to-back losses against 2 of the other elite teams in the NFC North. The Bears, that was a frustrating one. We know that. The Packers, a heartbreaking one. But, let's be honest. The Bears, a pretty good team. Not maybe elite, but a pretty good and constantly getting better team. The Lions, arguably the best team in the conference, and you barely lost to them. And then the Packers, despite having nobody on this roster, the Rams almost beat the Packers, another one of those elite teams. And then you beat the Vikings, right? So, obviously you only go 1-4 against this, or 1-3 against this division, but all 4 games you could have won. And now the schedule, in my opinion, gets a little bit easier. We go to Seattle, division game. We know how these teams always play against each other. Honestly, don't know how this one's going to go, but with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back, I think the Rams are the favorites. I really do. Then you're playing the Dolphins. It's in LA. If Tua's back, I think he will be, because I think he's supposed to be back this week. That's another game where, with the Rams at home, I'm taking the Rams, right? Then you're at the Patriots. You have to win that game. And now, wait a second. I'd say even if you split against the Seahawks and the Dolphins, and then you absolutely beat the Patriots, you're 5-5. You're 5-5. Very much in the playoff picture. At 5-5, at the very least, the wild card. That might be good enough in this division, especially if you beat the Seahawks next week. If you beat the Seahawks next week, you might go right back to being the favorites to win the NFC West. pretty crazy. But if you're 5-5, Eagles, Saints, Bills, Niners, you got to at least win 2 of those. I'd say probably you beat the Saints and hopefully you beat the Niners if they're still banged up. Maybe you split one of the 2 against the Bills and Eagles. And then you got Jets, Cardinals, Seahawks. You win at least 2 of those. This is a playoff team. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was saying that I still believed it coming into that Rams game. I certainly believe it it's not Rams, Raiders game. I didn't see it talent-wise, but record-wise, I thought we still had a chance. And now when you win this game against the class of the NFC, one of the best teams in the Vikings, looking to lead again with everybody back, the playoffs are a real possibility again. Now, please, for the love of God, Gavin, get to this defense before we wrap this one up. The defense played pretty darn well, and it's now back-to-back weeks where they played pretty darn well. It's honestly a stretch where they haven't been as bad as everyone talks about. Of course, did they let the Cardinals put up 41 on them? Yes. Have they held a single team to under 20 points all season? No, I get it. They did the Raiders. The Raiders are hardly a team, I know that, but they look pretty elite against the Raiders. As bad as the Raiders are, you force multiple turnovers, and you score a defensive touchdown. You basically scored as many points as you allowed. You scored a touchdown and didn't allow one. That's about as good as a defense can play. I know the Raiders are hardly a college football team, let alone an NFL football team, but you did do that. And then against the Vikings offense, who, like I said, Sam Darnold, as elite as they are in the first quarter with the scheme, with everything, they were elite in the first quarter. But after the first quarter, what did they do? Just 2 field goals. The rest of the game, you were able to limit them. Darnold looked uncomfortable. You get 3 sacks, including the safety. I get it was probably a face mask, but, if his hand is 2 inches lower, no one's talking about the face mask. Instead, they're talking about another young Rams star coming through, making a sack to clinch a victory, because at the end of the day, the entire front 7, all the young guys, looked elite. How about Jared Verse in this ball game? Statistically wise, maybe you won't see it completely because who am I kidding? With Jared Verse, you will see it statistically. A sack and a half, a TFL, 3 total tackles. He was fantastic. He looked strong. He looked quick. He looked everything of a first-round draft pick. He has been all season, and so fired up about Jared Verse. How about Kobe Turner? Leading the team in tackles along with Christian Rosenboom, but Kobe Turner all over the field, another TFL doing his job. And then I think the underrated player in this game, as much as you could talk about Byron Young having the huge safety sack, I get it was a face mask, but still a great play. I thought Braden Fisk kind of had an underrated game. Not only did he set up one of those Jared Verse sacks, not only did he play a role in that Byron Young sack as well, but a couple tackles for him. I thought Braden Fisk looked really good. Really excited about this young front 7. It's going to be good enough. Is the secondary great? No, not at all. But what happened? We were able to put more attention on Justin Jefferson. We were able to shut down their run game in the second half. So the play action, the Justin Jefferson across the middle, it wasn't involved. Justin Jefferson made that incredible left-handed catch. Didn't really matter. You saw him getting pissed off as the game went on. The secondary doesn't have to be elite. If the front 7 is elite, can stop the run, get some pressure, it's good enough to hide the weaknesses on the back end. And then with our offense doing what it does, anytime you're leading, it puts more pressure on the offense, obviously. More pressure on the offensive line because you can't fool it run pass. You know the pass is probably coming. The front 7 for the Rams can then pin their ears back, rush the passer, and create chaos around the QB to help our secondary. And that's exactly what we saw as this game went on. So, in my opinion, a real team effort. One last thing I'll say, in why it's a total team effort, the offense picked up the defense early on, right? The defense was showing no life, and the offense has 2 beautiful touchdown drives. Then, the second the offense slows down, the defense picks it up and forces back-to-back punts. Then the Rams offense continues to struggle in the second half. Initially, with that Stafford pick, defense does enough, holds them to a field goal. Then the Rams offense takes the lead again with the touchdown drives, back-to-back touchdowns to Demarcus Robinson, and then the defense does its job at the end. How about Cooper Kupp steps out of bounds when the Rams are trying to run the clock out on 3rd down, and instead of, things falling apart, how about special teams? Multiple punts inside the 5, inside the 10. That punt is one of the more underrated plays in this game and probably will be one of the most underrated plays in what could be a winning streak for the Rams. Cooper Kupp steps out of bounds, saves the Vikings 40 seconds, and if that punt isn't great, if it's a touchback, Vikings have the ball at the 20. There's no sack on Sam Darnold in the end zone. There's no safety. We might be talking about 28-28, another overtime game against an NFC North team like the Lions, and maybe another heartbreaking loss. But instead, even though Cooper Kupp steps out of bounds, even though it stops the clock, beautiful punt, pins him inside the 5, and then the safety happens right after that. So credit to every phase of this game, every phase of this team. The offense did it early. The defense picked it up after that. The offense comes back and does a job. The special teams does its job, especially on that punt late. And the Rams pull out a huge 30-20 win over the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football in front of the whole NFL world, announcing one more time, we're not trading Cooper Kupp. We're sure as heck not trading Matthew Stafford. We're not talking trades. We're talking the title. We're still talking the title. 30-20 over the Vikings. Rams 3-4, 3-1 at SoFi, and right back in the NFC West championship picture, not just the wild card and playoff picture. All right, we're going to wrap this one up. Once again, I'm Gavin Carlson, former credentialed journalist in the LA area, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. One more thing I will say, shout out to my man Pete Fox, also on this network, holding it down, doing a great job with the Dodgers as he'll, cover this World Series for us on these postcasts, doing his thing with USC. As much as I hate USC, you see the UCLA, maybe you see it, the sash right there. You certainly see the helmet there. I'm UCLA as it gets. But especially for holding it down with the Clippers. If you watched his postcast last night, you know. If you didn't watch his postcast last night, then I'll tell you. Pete is doing the Locked On Clippers postcast. As of now, the Locked On Lakers postcast is still being finalized. Obviously, I was originally supposed to do one of those two, but I actually, some of you know, some of you don't. I now work for the Clippers, so kind of a conflict of interest there. If I'm covering the Clippers, if I'm working for the Clippers, let's just say this, I can't do this show because I'm literally in meeting. I'm on the business side of things with the Clippers, but I'll give an example. Today, I literally had we had a talk from the GM of the Clippers, right? If I'm getting direct information from the general manager of the LA Clippers, I can't come on here and do a journalist show now that I have inside information, right? I've had, the Lawrence Frank, the basketball president, president of basketball operations for the Clippers. He's talked to my team, right? So if I'm having this inside information from people within the organization, I can't then come out here and act like I'm a journalist who doesn't know things when I know way too many things, right? So a little explanation there in case you're confused on why there's no Lakers postcast, why I'm not doing a basketball show. I work for an NBA team. I am prevented from doing that anymore, but I'm still holding it down with the Rams. We'll have UCLA, of course, going forward as well. And then Pete's holding it down with the Clippers. I'll say he did a great job on the postcast for the Clippers. I was at Intuit Dome last night because I worked for the team. It was unbelievable. Highly recommend you making it out to a game there. But with all that being said, the moral of the story is shout out Pete. Shout out everybody who watches Locked On LA YouTube channel, all the podcasts, including this one. Shout out to some of the comments here. I see Fudd Alex, I see BC, I see Craig, I see William, I see La Habra Sports Fan 07, I see Daniel Barry. Shout out to all of you. Appreciate all the comments. We'll just look at the last few here. Jeffrey says, what a huge win against a good team. Season-saving win. Let's stop with the trade rumors and let this team cook. Absolutely. BC says, whose house? Craig says, Rams offense looked completely different tonight. Scoring 30 was a big deal. Absolutely. Dominate the Seahawks and their first place in the NFC West. Absolutely. Absolutely. So shout out to everybody. And shout out to Fudd Alex saying he misses the Angels postcast. I love all my Angels postcasters as well. We're going to wrap this one up. I will say I am repping my Clips. Go Clippers. And go Rams, baby. What a win. We're going to wrap this one up. Shout out to everybody in here. And as always, even after a loss, but we don't have to say after a loss because it's a win. Go Rams. Shout out to the Ramley. And one more time, just because. Not this skull, not this whose house? Rams house, baby. Take care, everybody. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one.